Hi, everyone.
Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom and welcome. We are having an opportunity to extend the celebration of Earth Day. And so we're going to begin with Psalm 96 in this wonderful setting by Cantor Jordan Franzel. Let the heavens rejoice and the earth exult. Let the sea and all within it thunder, the fields and everything in them exult. Then shall all the trees of the forest shout for joy at the presence of Adonai, for God is coming. God is coming to rule this earth. Shiru Ladonai.
Shiru Ladonai, Shir Hadash, Shiru Ladonai, Kol Haaretz. Shiru Ladonai, Baruch Shemo, Basim Liyom Liyom Yeshuato. Shiru Ladonai, Shir Hadash, Shiru Ladonai, Kol Haaretz. Shiru Ladonai, Baruch Shemo, Basim Liyom Liyom Yeshuato.
Saru v'goyim tivodo, b'chol ha'amim tivodo, kikol Adonai, u'b'chol ha'meyot, Torah hu'akol Elohim. Sing unto God and the soul of the earth, sing to Adonai, bless God's name. Tell of God's great glory among the nations of the earth. Avul Adonai mishpachot avim, Avul Adonai kivod avos, Avul Adonai kivod shelo, Avul Adonai sing Adonai of the earth, sing to Adonai, bless God's name. Aftikanti v'yapatimot, yatinani v'meisharim.
Shiru Ladonai, Shir Hadash, Shiru Ladonai, Kol Haaretz. Shiru Ladonai, Baruch Shemo, Basim Liyom Liyom Yeshuato. Basim Liyom Liyom Yeshuato. Basim Liyom Liyom Yeshuato.
Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom. It is good to sing the joy of the earth, the beauty that surrounds us, the beauty that we can find all around, and that inspires beauty and joy within us as well. We're here on this Shabbat immediately following Earth Day, so we're calling it our Earth Day Shabbat, to sing these joyful songs to really celebrate this earth that is our responsibility. God creates and God gives to human beings the responsibility to care for this treasured world. And we are reminding ourselves tonight about that responsibility and the meaningfulness that comes from that responsibility.
We want to take a moment, as we do now every Friday, to welcome everyone. If you're joining us for the first time, I'm Cantor Ida Ray Kahana.
Rabbi Michael Kahana, and however you're joining us, whether it's on our stream, whether it's on Zoom, whether it's on Facebook Live, YouTube, we have lots of different ways for you, and we're very pleased, however you found us, that you did find us, and that you are part. This Shabbat, you are part of this community, all of us together, standing together, being strong together, and being filled with meaning together.
We ask, if you'd like, to take a moment right now to reach out to somebody in our community or in a community far from you. Maybe you're thinking about a friend across the country someplace. You want to wish them a Shabbat Shalom. Go ahead and send them a text or an email and let them know that you're sending them love. And we send all of you a lot of love this Shabbat. We are celebrating Earth Day, and we're also celebrating Shabbat. And tomorrow morning, it will be our great joy to welcome two young men who will be becoming B'nai Mitzvah, Alex and Eli Venabush. And so I am going to invite their family to come on and unmute themselves as Nadine will lead us along with Patrick and the boys in the blessing over the candles. It's on
And the
page
feedback.
2. Well, yeah, we'll figure out the feedback. There we go. Shabbat shalom. Nice to see
Welcome
you.
to the
Shabbat
family.
shalom.
So,
As these Shabbat candles give light to all who behold them, so may we, by our lives, give light to all who behold us. As their brightness reminds us of the generations of Israel who have kindled light, so may we, in our own day, be among those who kindle light. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotov v'tzivanu l'hamid ner Shabbat.
Amen.
amen. Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom.
Thank you. I love the 2 candles, and then I can see the boys' 2 faces in another room in another corner. Your family certainly has brought a lot of light to us. We're so happy that you're here with us. Alex and Eli, let's have you guys unmute. You're going to lead us in Kiddush. That's on page 5.
We'll invite everyone,
Everyone,
to
if you can,
please
please rise. Yes.
and unmute.
I know.
There you go.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam moreh pari hagafen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'ratzah banu v'shabbat kodsho v'ahava uvratzon hinchilanu zikaron lema'aseh b'reishit Kibud Yom Tehila Lemikraye Kodesh Zecher Litziat Mitzrayim Kivanu Vacharta Votanu Kidashta Mikol Ha'amim Shabbat Koshecha Be'ahava Uvratzon Inchaltanu, Baruch atah Adonai, Mekadesh HaShabbat.
Amen. L'chaim to both of you, and Mazal Tov to your whole family. We're looking forward to services tomorrow morning at 10:30 with you. We continue now with welcoming Shabbat with Lecha Dodi. It's on page 20 of the prayer book. We do verses 1, 2, 5, and 9.
Dodi likrat kala
V'nei Shabbat nekabela, Shema v'zachor diburecha tishmianu, Elam yuchad Adonai echad, U'shemo echad l'shemo tiferet v'litilal.
Lecha Dodi likrat kala B'nei Shabbat nekabela
Lecha Dodi
likrat kala B'nei Shabbat nekabela
Likrat Shabbat v'necha ki mekor haberacha merosh mikedem nesucha sof ma'aseh b'machshavat chila
Lecha Dodi likrat kala B'nei Shabbat nekabela Lecha Dodi likrat kala פני שבת נקבלה.
התעוררי, כי באורך קומי אורי, אורי שידברי, כבוד אדוני עלייך נגלה.
לך דודי לקראת כלה, פני שבת נקבלה. לך דודי לקראת כלה, פני שבת נקבלה. Please rise, turn towards the door, welcome the bride.
אוי ושלום עטרת בעלה, גם בשמחה ובצהלה, תוך אמוני עם סגולה. בואי חלה, בואי
לך דודי לקראת כלה, פני שבת נקבלה. לך דודי לקראת כלה, פני שבת נקבלה. Remain standing as we turn to page 28 as we invite each other to gather into prayer.
ברכו את אדוני המבורך.
ברוך אדוני המבורך לעולם ועד.
ברוך אדוני המבורך לעולם ועד.
Praise to you, Adonai, our God, from whom the evening flows. Your wisdom sets the way in which time and season glide. Your breath guides the sail of the stars. Creator of the tide of time and light, you guide the currents of day into night. As heaven spins to infinity, you set its course for eternity. Baruch atah Adonai Amariv Aravim, praise to you, Adonai, our God, from whom the evening flows. Page 34, we remain standing for Shema.
Shema Yisrael,
Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad.
Baruch Shem
Kevod
Kevod Malchuto
Leolam
Vaed.
Please be seated.
ואהבת
את אדוני אלוהיך בכל לבבך ובכל נפשך ובכל מאודיך, והיו הדברים האלה אשר אנוכי מצווך היום על לבביך, ושיננתם לבניך ודיברת בם בשבתך בביתך ובלכתך בדרך ובשוכבך ובקומך, וקשרתם לאות ידיך והיו לטוטפות בין עיניך, וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך ובשעריך, למען תזכרו ועשיתם את כל מצוותיי, והייתם קדושים לאלוהיכם. אני אדוני אלוהיכם, אשר הוצאתי אתכם מארץ מצרים, להיות לכם לאלוהים. אני אדוני אלוהיכם. Standing at the parted shores of history, We still believe what we were taught before we ever stood at Sinai's foot, that wherever we go, it is eternally Egypt, that there is a better place, a promised land, that the winding way to that promise passes through the wilderness, that there is no way to get from here to there except by joining hands and marching together. מי כמוך מיילים אדוני, מי כמוך נהדר בקודש, נורא תהילות, אוסף אלה, נורא תהילות, אוסף אלה, מלכותך רב ובניך בוקע, יד לפני משה ומרים, צאני, אנו ביונרו, אדוני ימלוך, לעולם ועד. לי, 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 לי,
ונאמר כי פרעה אדוני את יעקב וגואלו מיד חזק ממנו, ברוך אתה אדוני גוי ישראל.
Let there be love and understanding among us. Let peace and friendship be our shelter from life's storms. Adonai, help us to walk with good companions, to live with hope in our hearts and eternity in our thoughts, that we may lie down in peace and rise up, waiting to do your will. Baruch atah Adonai, hapores sukat shalom aleinu, ve'al kol amo Yisrael, ve'al Yerushalayim. Blessed are you, Adonai, guardian of the people Israel, whose shelter of peace is spread over us, over all your people Israel, and over Jerusalem.
Amen. Continuing on page 44. Vishamru
Bnei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat, לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית עולם.
ביני ובין בני ישראל, אותי לעולם, אותי לעולם.
ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת, לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית עולם.
כי ששת ימים עשה אדוני את השמיים ואת הארץ.
ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת, לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית עולם.
וביום השביעי שבת וינפש, שבת וינפש, שבת וינפש.
ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת, לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית עולם. In 6 days Adonai made heaven and earth, and on the 7th day God rested and was refreshed. We rise for Tefillah, page 46.
Adonai
שפתי תפתח ופי יגיד תהילתך. אדוני up my lips, that my mouth may declare your praise.
Baruch atah Adonai,
Eloheinu v'Elohei Avotenu v'Imotenu, Elohei Avraham, Elohei Yitzchak, Elohei Yaakov, Elohei Sarah, Elohei Rivka, Elohei Rachel, Elohei Leah, האל הגדול הגיבור והנורא, אל עליון, גומל חסדים טובים, וקונה הכל, וזוכר חסדי אבות ואימהות, ומביא גאולה לבני בניהם, למען שמו באהבה, מלך עוזר ומושיע ומגן. ברוך אתה אדוני, מגן אברהם, עזרת שרה.
אתה גיבור לעולם אדוני, מחיה כל עטריו להושיע.
מוריד אתה, מחכה חיים בחסד, מחיה הכל ברחמים רבים, סומך נופלים ורופא חולים, ומתיר אסורים, ומקיים אמונתו לשני עפר. מי כמוך בעל גבורות, ומדום מלך, מלך ממית ומחיה, ומצמיח ישועה.
ונאמן נטע להחיות הכל.
ברוך אתה אדוני, מחיה הכל.
אתה קדוש ושמך קדוש, וקדוש שם בכל יום יהללוך סלע.
ברוך אתה אדוני, האל הקדוש. You are holy and your name is holy, and those who are holy praise you every day. Blessed are you, Adonai, the holy God.
Baruch atah Adonai, האל הקדוש.
As we think about this week, not only the focus on Earth Day, that is so significant, but also the historic verdict that was delivered in the murder trial of Derek Chauvin and the murder of George Floyd. A verdict that reminds us that justice is something that always needs to be pursued vigorously, and something that we need to pay attention to as part of our responsibility. There is justice of the earth, and there is justice for human beings, and there's economic justice we need to be always aware of. So I add this reading from our Mishkan Tefillah, our prayer book. Disturb us, Adonai, ruffle us from our complacency, make us dissatisfied with a piece of ignorance, the quietude which arises from a shunning of the horror, the defeat, the bitterness, and the poverty, physical and spiritual, of humans. Shock us, Adonai, deny to us the false Shabbat, which gives us delusions of satisfaction amid a world of war and hatred. Wake us, O God, shake us from the sweet and sad poignancies rendered by half-forgotten melodies and rubric prayers of yesteryears. Make us know that the border of the sanctuary is not the border of living. The walls of temples are not shelters from the winds of truth, justice, and reality. Disturb us, O God, vex us. Let not your Shabbat be a day of torpor and slumber. Let it be a time to be stirred and spurred to action. Baruch atah Adonai mekadesh HaShabbat. Blessed are you, Adonai, who sanctifies the Sabbath.
Amen. We're going to take a few moments for quiet gratitude for all the many blessings that we have, for what we've seen this week and the hope that it gave to us. whatever the prayer of your heart is, this is precious time to let that bubble up.
Causes peace to reign in the high heavens, let peace descend on us, on all the people, Israel, and all of the world. And we say, Amen.
Amen.
Take a moment to offer prayers for those in our community who are ill, for those who are in need of prayer. If there's anyone in your life who could use a prayer of healing right now and you'd like to share that with us, please do so now.
We're praying also for the patience that we all need in order to keep going during this time as the cases are rising here in our state. And so as we're praying for healing and wholeness, let us also pray for that patience that we all need. Please repeat after me.
Elna rifanala, Elna rifanalo, Elna rifanalanu, Elna rifanalanu.
May we find our way to healing and wholeness. Amen.
Amen. We are in a period of counting as we are moving from the experience of the Exodus of Egypt that we celebrate on Passover to the redemptive power of God's presence that we celebrate on Shavuot. This journey, which is a journey of the soul. And each of us makes our own journey today and every day. And what's most important is that every day of our journey is a day that counts. And so we invite you to rise again as we count the Omer.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu al sfirat haomer hayom shiva v'yasrim yom shem shusha shavuot v'shisha yamim לעומר.
Today is 27 days, which is 3 weeks and 6 days of the Omer. Please be seated. In honor of Earth Day, I was asked to invite a guest who might be able to share with us some perceptions on the issues that are facing our planet during this time. Earth Day was created as a day to pay attention to the realities of climate change. And I have a very exciting pleasure to be able to welcome a dear friend of mine, one of my oldest friends, in fact, who is a world-renowned biologist and expert in climate change. We're going to see this conversation in just a moment, but I want to introduce her to you first. And perhaps we'll share screens so you can see her before we get started. My dear friend, Professor Camille Parmesan, who received her PhD in biological sciences from the University of Texas at Austin in 1995. She is currently a professor at Plymouth University in the UK, an adjunct professor and senior research fellow at the University of Texas at Austin, and a professor at the CNRS Station d'Écologie Théorique et Expérimentale in France. I butchered the French, but you get the idea. She is in France. Camille's world-leaning research has documented the global nature of climate change impacts on all living organisms. The intensification of global warming as an international issue led her into the interface of policy and science. She's given presentations for the U.S. White House Congressional Seminar Series and has been involved in several U.S. and international assessments of climate change impacts. Her 2003 paper in the journal Nature was ranked as the most highly cited paper in climate change. Camille has received several awards of distinction for her work in climate change and conservation. She was a lead author for the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, which in 2007 was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize. In 2018, she was one of the 18 scientists invited by President Macron to work in France for the ambitious Make Our Planet Great Again program, which launched right after the United States withdrew from the Paris Agreement. I was hoping in an ideal world that we would be able to have a conversation live, but it is 3:30 in the morning in France. So I recorded this in advance a few days ago. And I recorded it, we had our conversation before we learned about President Biden's very ambitious plans to cut greenhouse gases in the United States by 50% in the next decade. So we are on an exciting trajectory, and you'll hear more about that need and responsibility to deal with greenhouse gases. But I am very happy to share with you my conversation with my dear friend, Professor Camille Parmesan. Professor Camille Parmesan, welcome. Thank you so much for taking this time to speak with us. Happy Earth Day.
Happy Earth Day, and thank you for helping to celebrate it.
Thank you. You and I have known each other a very, very long time, and I've had great joy in following your career and seeing you not just in the work that you've been doing in your own experimental research, but the way that you've become a real spokesperson for people understanding the realities of climate change and the urgency of understanding climate change. But let's go back a little bit first and get us a little set up. Tell me about
when you first became aware of the planet-wide changes that climate change represent?
Well, it was actually while I was doing my field work, and I had started a project funded by NASA that was to look for impacts of climate change. But I started it at a time when the climate scientists were still debating about whether they were seeing global warming. They expected it just from basic physics, basic first principles, but they weren't sure that they were seeing it yet. And so I had put in this proposal to say, well, I've got this butterfly that's really, really sensitive to climate, and if anyone's going to be showing impacts, it's going to be this butterfly. And so I was actually doing field work, not sure what I was going to find, not sure if anything was happening at all. And as I'm traveling around from Mexico to Canada, after about in the second year, I start realizing, they're going extinct down in Mexico, but they're doing fine in Canada. And, they're going extinct near the ocean, but they're doing fine in the high mountains. And it just kind of hit me. Wow, this is it. I'm seeing the impacts of global warming before the climate scientists actually know it's happening. And it was gradual. It wasn't like a sudden light bulb, but as the season's going on, and it really was into that second, maybe even early in the third year of doing field work, that I was calling home to my husband and saying, I'm going to keep doing the work, I'm going to keep looking, but if this pattern keeps up, this is huge. It means like this entire species is moving northward and upward. It's not some like complex, sophisticated, subtle impact, which is what I was expecting. No, it's just boom, the whole thing is moving up. And that really was, I don't often get astonished when I'm doing field work, but that was pretty astonishing, And then next year, the climate scientists published, the warming trend globally was significant. So it was like our studies got published within a few months of each other. It was really pretty cool.
And your study on this attracted really global attention.
Oh yeah, because there was still such strong debate in the climate community, and because biologists, again, we knew from first principle that of course most wild plants and animals are sensitive to climate. Everyone knows this, right? Your rose bush dies if it's too cold or if it's too dry. But ecologists, biologists weren't expecting to be seeing any impacts for decades. I mean, literally decades. And suddenly I come out with this paper, this, entire species is moving northward and upward across the whole of Western North America. And it was just, wow. And that for a lot of biologists, that was what they needed. They needed a single, really convincing, large geographic area being impacted.
So this is how a biologist becomes a spokesperson in many ways for the realities of climate change by being able to see the effects in an actual species.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. And then when I was giving seminars around the world about it, what was interesting is that the conservation biologists were almost the most reluctant to accept it because, they were used to dealing with invasive species and habitat destruction. And I kept saying to them, look, you do all of that and you don't deal with climate change, you're going to lose it anyway. So you have to take climate change on board. And it took 10 years of going, and this is going to these conservation conferences, 10 years before they turned around. And they turned around because they started seeing the impacts in their favorite species or in their protected area that they were preserving. And suddenly it was real, right? Not just theoretical.
What year was that paper?
My paper was in 1996. And, it was really getting towards the late 2000s before the the conservation community started realizing that they had to deal with climate change.
So we're seeing that scientists have been struggling with this question for a long time. It's not
Right.
that it was suddenly apparent, and all the scientists all over the world said, we have 100% agreement.
No.
There's some struggle there. Has that changed?
You're right. It's a period of transition when you're gathering the studies and studies are being published, and people are looking for it. Oh, is it just that my butterfly is really climate sensitive? Is this a more general thing? Is it just Western North America? Is it global? And so you've got to kind of start packing up all those studies and getting all that done. And it was the same for the climate scientists. So they came around to agreement earlier than the biologists did because they had been looking at it for much longer. They had a couple more decades of information. But by now, I don't meet any biologists, ecologists, conservation biologists that don't accept that climate change is happening. And not just that it's happening, but it's starting to become the number one threat to preservation of biodiversity.
And what's the best science that indicates that climate change is human-driven?
Oh, it's actually a really cool story because it's not just one piece of science. It's a bunch of different kinds of evidence. And I'll give you the elevator version. It's from basic physics. We know that these molecules that we call greenhouse gases, carbon dioxide, nitrous oxide, even water, they're the simplest term is that they're insulating. Technically it's not the right term, but it's good enough for this purpose that when you build up these greenhouse gases that you tend to retain heat on one side of them. And so has been an expectation since the late 1700s that if you increase greenhouse gases in the atmosphere, that it will warm the temperature of the planet. And this is why we can live on this planet. If there weren't greenhouse gases in the atmosphere, we couldn't live. So that's actually been known since 1760 was when it was first discovered. And in the 1800s, a Swedish biologist was saying, or climate scientist, was saying, isn't this fantastic? We're pumping out all of this carbon dioxide from burning fossil fuels, and it's going to warm up the planet, and Sweden is going to be able to grow grapes. So, it wasn't even considered a negative thing. Mm-hmm. And then in the 1960s, the data set started becoming available that we could see this sharp rise in carbon dioxide. We were actually seeing that we were definitely increasing it, by how much. And that was predicted in the 1960s that about 1970s, 1980s, that this would be warming the planet. And I think actually the prediction went further than that, and it's been pretty spot on. So from basic physical principles, we've warmed as much as you would expect going back before the warming actually began. And the next thing is that the warming we're getting now really is off the charts. If you look at the records for the past several thousand years, it's just way above and beyond what we call natural variability, sort of the natural ups and downs that you see over the years. And more than that, if you look at the other types of factors which can affect climate, like solar radiation, so when you get an increase in solar activity, the sun gets more active, it can heat the planet up, right? Because it's literally pumping out more radiation and hitting the planet. And yet, solar activity has actually been declining at the last few decades. So we should be cooling, not warming, if the sun were what were driving it. And finally, what I think is so cool are these fingerprints in the actual signature of what's happening with our climate, the patterns that we're seeing in the climate change. And one of those patterns is, if you think of greenhouse gases as adding a blanket to the Earth, then the warming should be closest at the surface, right? And if you look at radiosondes that go way up into the upper atmosphere, what you see now is about in the 1970s, the surface temperatures started warming, and they've been doing this, little ups and downs, but basically that. And yet, if you get above that, if you get into the high, up at 30,000, 35,000 feet, they've had a cooling trend. And that's exactly what you expect from increasing this sort of insulating blanket around the surface of the Earth. And it's also the same reason why winters are warming more than summers, because we've increased our blanket, we've increased our insulation, we haven't increased the amount of energy coming in. And, night times are warming more than day. So all of these lines of evidence just fit together beautifully. And I haven't even mentioned the complex modeling that's gone on, because I actually find the real data is so convincing in and of itself. You don't need to even go to the level of these sophisticated models. And you put it all together, and there's simply no doubt. And in fact, the last IPCC report stated that warming of the climate system is virtually certain, and it is highly likely that this is due to human activities. Very, very strong statement, very strong consensus of the global community of climate scientists.
And this is scientists across many different fields, right, that have come together in the IPCC, which you are actively a member in and an author of IPCC reports.
Very much.
So tell us a little bit about IPCC and your involvement. How did you get involved, and what is its role in this moment?
Well, it was devised by climate scientists, by the World Meteorological Organization, actually, and it's the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. And for a good decade, really, it was assessing only the climate science, the data, the modeling, the atmospheric changes. And then after about a decade, when they started realizing they were finding something very significant going on, they started bringing in the impacts people, of which I'm one. But not just biologists, people who work on hurricanes, people who work on glaciers, economists, health professionals, really all the other disciplines that are impacted by changing climate. And I got involved because of that single paper in 1996 where I said this butterfly is moving northward and upward. I gave a talk at the White House shortly after it was published. And while I was there, a guy came up to me and said, I'm heading this group called the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, and we'd like you to be an author. And I'm like, I guess, what's the commitment, And it's no pay, by the way. This is all volunteer time. And I said yes. And I started working within the next few months. And I was a postdoc. And everyone else was what we call a silverback. Everyone else was older, white, male. Very senior. There were hardly any women. There were about 3 women out of, we're talking 200 and some people, right? About 3 women, and very, very little diversity. And now, that was, back in 1997. Now, I'm still in IPCC, and now it's like, it's easily half or more women, all kinds of age groups. They've really diversified the age groups as well as the gender. And culturally much, much more diverse than it used to be. So it has grown, and now I think we're almost 300 people. And it's been really good because we're bringing in issues of equity and justice that really wasn't a topic back in the late 1990s. So it's been good. It's growing in a very good direction.
So the IPCC reports have been very important in helping governments understand what climate change is all about and what some of the what needs to be done. Although, as I understand it, in the past, IPCC hasn't tried to give specific legislative recommendations, but they have set guidelines. So, tell me if I'm right. The overall goal is no more than a 2 degree Celsius increase in global temperatures, which is obviously going to vary in different areas, but as a global target. And actually the recommendation that 2 degrees is a real maximum. The actual recommendation is 1.5 degrees. So it's an auspicious target. What needs to be done in order to actually reach those kinds of targets?
Well, first we have to step back and remember that we've already had more than 1 degree centigrade. So if you're talking about a 2 degree centigrade target by the end of this century, we've already are halfway there. And greenhouse gas emissions are still rising. We have not even stabilized, much less started going down. A lot of scientists are starting to believe that 1.5 is not realistic, but we have been told that we have to keep that in. Whether or not we think it's realistic, it's got to be in, because that is an official internationally agreed target. And IPCC, the mantra is to be policy relevant but not policy prescriptive. So we're very, very careful to not say you should do this or you need to do that, but to provide a set of options. If you do this, then here's the result, based on the best science we have. If you do that, then this is the result. And certainly we're not telling them how to achieve those targets. But what's really interesting is, this is the 3rd report that I've been heavily involved in, and it's now the 6th assessment report. And for the first time in our scoping documents, which is what the government's put together, we were really pushed to provide more solutions. And like, okay, we're not supposed to be policy prescriptive, but you want us to provide solutions. How do we do this? So we're doing it by really just extending the options that we present and saying, look, if you want to achieve 1.5, these are the steps you're going to have to take. If you're trying to stay under 2, then these are the steps you're going to take. If we get over 2, then here are the consequences of doing that for these different sectors. And so we're still working hard to stay relevant rather than prescriptive. But it's interesting to me that the governments are getting more and more desperate because they don't know what to do. And they want more input. They want more ideas. They want more tools in the toolbox. And that, to some extent, scientists can provide that. But to another extent, basically the best thing we can do is reduce greenhouse gas emissions, right? All the post hoc strategies that we can come up with are just kind of damage control. They're not really achieving what the Paris Accords were trying for, which is preventing dangerous climate change in the first place. And at this point, as I said, a lot of people don't think 1.5 is even feasible. So let's think about 2 degrees by the end of the century. Even if we're trying for that, we no longer can just do reduction of emissions. Now remember, we haven't done reduction of emissions yet to any great degree. We're still ramping up on a global scale. Individual countries have reduced their emissions. Great Britain has done a good job. Europe as a whole has done a good job. But globally, we're still ramping up because, as some of the developed countries get better at their emissions controls, then developing countries, want the same standard of living that we all have, and so their emissions go up. And so, since emissions keep going up, at this point, we are committed to a certain level of climate change. And the only way of getting to 2 degrees, only getting to 2 degrees rather than going over that, is we have to start sucking up the greenhouse gases. How do you do that? The best way of doing that is right behind me. Natural systems. Plants. Plants suck up carbon dioxide. Plants suck up nitrous oxide. And any technological solution, you can get a scrubber, a machine that you can put into the atmosphere, and it will suck up the carbon dioxide. And that's, effectively that's what you have on some power plants. to capture the carbon dioxide, right? But the scale to actually do that on a global level for the Earth's atmosphere, you would be taking a continent. You know, the machine would be the size of a continent. So, you know, people say, oh, technology will fix it all. It's like, well, the best technology we have is just, you can only do it in the lab on a small scale. So at this point, what we're realizing is that, you know, the other working group, which deals with mitigation, which is all the how do you reduce emissions, they've got their work cut out for them. But as a biologist, what I'm starting to stress is we need to get nature in better shape to help us soak up what we've already put out. And we can do that in so many different ways. Partly it's just getting our ecosystems to be healthier. People look at a green space and they say, oh, it's green, it must be healthy. No, that doesn't mean it's healthy. Healthy means you have a lot of different species. Healthy means you've got it functioning really well and sucking up a lot of carbon and putting it into roots in the soil and putting it into biomass. And it's something that does take, for a lot of systems at this point, a level of management. In some areas we can just leave things to recover on their own, but for an awful lot of systems, like, it used to be a cornfield, we've abandoned it, that's a really trash piece of land. We don't want that situation. We want to have a much more vibrant, functioning ecosystem there. And to do that, we have to put some work into it. So a lot of what are called nature-based solutions are not just protecting pristine areas, because we don't have a lot of those left. I mean, we need to protect them, but we also need to go into degraded areas and restore them and get their functioning back. And the difficulty is with climate change. So here's climate change all the time. Climate change is moving on. And so when you think of restoring a system, say it was a cornfield, you've abandoned it because it's no longer economically viable to produce corn there. You want to restore it back to a native prairie, but climate is changing. It's getting hotter and drier, so what species do you put back there? So even the act of restoration that we actually can do really well. I mean, ecology has just made amazing strides. We can restore tropical rainforest. We can restore mangroves. We can restore wetlands. But that's all kind of assuming everything's stable. And you've got this climate change. It starts becoming tricky even to figure out how do you restore a system. You don't always want to go back to what it was historically. You want it to go back to something healthy and diverse that will actually make it into the next century.
Well, here on the Pacific Northwest and in the West Coast, we've been dealing a lot with wildfires, which many people are assuming is part of the consequence of climate change. So are you suggesting that the restoration efforts that we could be making, that we could be encouraging in our own communities, could be an aid in combating climate change?
Oh, absolutely. And you're spot on. Western North America is one of the places in the globe that we've got good enough data to really be able to say the increase in fire frequency and increase in burned area is related to human-driven climate change. So yes, you're right. It is partly due to climate change, partly also due, in some areas it is forest management has increased the fuel load. But as we're restoring, if you've got a swatch of burned hillside, you need to get something back there, or else you're just going to have massive loss of soil. In the next big rain, you just lose it all. And once you lose that topsoil, and you get down to the lower soils, you've lost a lot of your richest soil. So you want to get something in there, but the question is, what do you put in? And that really takes, you need some expertise to say, well, maybe we don't want to put in exactly the same species, or maybe we want to try to get some genes, some genetic types, varieties of the same species from areas that are from climates that we're going into, right? So you're in northern Oregon, you might want to pick some seeds from northern California, right? From further south than where you are. But communities can be a huge help, because the biggest cost of restoration, the absolute biggest cost of it, is labor. Labor for people to go in and, plant the seeds or the trees or the seedlings. Labor to go in and weed out the exotic species as you're trying to get this sort of more native forest established. And I just think that would be such a fun thing for a community to do, to pick an area that was badly burned and say, okay, let's help get this back in good shape.
Well, as I've told you, this is a community that really cares about getting involved and making a difference. So that's an amazing suggestion right there. Do you have a particular organization that you can suggest for us?
I would first go to some of your local chapters of, say, the Nature Conservancy. If they would have some good input, I would talk to whoever is running the local forestry service, so a government level agency, to get their input onto what kind of species might go in. I mean, you definitely want some experts. I guess in your part of the world, it mostly would be restoring forest, right? Because in other areas, what you're trying to restore is peatland or prairie or whatever. But if you're restoring forest, then you do want people who can give you advice. I mean, and you want some climate scientists who can tell you where the climate's going in that area. And you want to look at where is it going in the next 100 years, climate-wise. And of course, the projections are variable, but you'll have some bounds. Say, okay, it's not going to be drier than this and it's not going to be hotter than that. And within those bounds, well, maybe you can pick a mix of species or varieties that can bed hedge. And not all of them are going to make it, but you want to get some diversity in so that those that do make it can then take over and you can have a productive ecosystem at the end of it. The expertise should be relatively easy to find within the Forestry Service, within the National Park Service, with some of the NGOs who have good relations in your part of the world. And it doesn't take them that long to provide some expertise. Like I said, the real difficulty is the actual, finding the seeds or the seedlings. Where do you purchasing them, and then planting. I mean, you've seen the burned areas. They're huge. It's a lot of work. And yet, if you get, even 20 people together, it doesn't take that much time.
This is really exciting possibilities, and I thank you. So often when we talk about Earth Day and the environmental work we can do, we get very focused on invasive species. But as you pointed out, it sounds like there's places to move beyond just restoring to what was, to restoring to what needs to be. So great, thank you, Professor Camille Parmesan. So wonderful to speak with you. We didn't even get a chance to talk about what the heck you're doing in southern France, but come home, we need you. Except I know that you're doing great work there, and I'm really grateful for you and for the work that you're doing and for this chance to speak with us. Happy Earth Day, and Shabbat Shalom.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Parmesan. What a great interview and some really wonderful suggestions for us. I've shared with her one of my favorite midrashim that I want to close us off with, and this is a moment in the Garden of Eden where God takes Abraham around the garden. This, in a text that's thousands of years old, describes God taking Adam around the garden and saying, look at this beautiful place that I've created. It's your responsibility. If you mess it up, there's no one who's going to be there to clean it up after you. And that reminder that there's no one else. This is in our hands. It's our responsibility to restore, to be able to create, to care for and nurture and love this beautiful planet that has cared for us for so long, and to make sure that there's something for the generations that are to come. Happy Earth Day to you, and may we continue to be inspired to do and to create together. We're going to turn back in our prayer books to page 282 as we rise for Aleinu.
Aleinu לשבח לאדון הכל, לתת גדולה ליוצר בראשית, שלא עשנו כגויי הארצות, ולא שמנו כמשפחות האדמה, שלא שם חלקנו כהם, וגורלנו ככל המונם.
ואנחנו קוראים ומשתחווים ומודים לפני מלך מלכי המלכים, הקדוש ברוך הוא.
ונאמר והיה אדוני
למלך על כל הארץ, ביום ההוא, ביום ההוא, יהיה אדוני אחד, ושמו, ושמו, ושמו אחד. Please be seated. Our thoughts turn to those who have departed this earth, our own loved ones, those whom our friends and neighbors have lost, the martyrs of our people whose graves are unmarked, and those of every race and nation whose lives have been a blessing to humanity. As we remember them, we meditate on the meaning of love and loss, of life and of death. We honor the memories of those who have recently died: John Gewurtz, Marcus Irving Gilden, Rose Ruth Corey, Lindsay Hornblass. And we honor the memories of those whose Yortzites, the anniversary of their passing, occurs during this time: Lester Sidney Baskin, Bernice B. Bloom, Sophia Kamowitz, Jenny Cohn, Edward Cohn Jr., Glenn Collins, Jerry Dennison, Annie Director, Florence Feldman, Francis Freeman, Cyril Garfinkel, Alan Goldsmith, Clara Heilmeyer, Genevieve Himmelstein, Norma Ruth Ullman Hornstein, Arthur Joseph, Malcolm Harold Call, Bernard Kay, Gloria Collar, Ida Kleinrock, Lori Labby, Allison Senders Lang, Molly Lertzman, Julius Levinson, David Leviton, Hannah E. Lewis, George Littau, Carl Lubliner, Edith Mazels, Barbara Friedman Mills, Samuel Moment, Leslie Moses, Patricia Leighton Niemer, Miriam Newelt, Rose Novich, Deborah Cohn Noodleman, Rita Oreshnik, Rose Papkin, Madeline Pitkin, Maurice J. Roth, Jack Sadis, Pearl Schlesinger, Ruth B. Siegel, Norma Seltzer, Evelyn Shapiro, Edith Steinbach, Bess Steiner, Charlotte Stern, Jean Marie Strauss, Alan Tell, Evelyn Treuhoft, Mary Willer. If anyone else is honoring a Yortzeit, or if I mispronounced a name, please share that name with us, or just simply say that name out loud. The memories of all of them are with us. Our griefs and our sympathies are mingled. As we turn to page 294, we rise, and together we say the words of Kaddish. Yit gadal v'yit gadash me rabbah, Be'alma divrach irute v'yamlich malchute, b'chayechon uv'yomechon, uv'chaye dechol Beit Yisrael, ba'agala v'zman kariv yimru, Amen. Yehi shmei rabam v'varach le'olam u'lamei almaya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh. V'yitadar v'yitalev v'yitalal shemei dekudusha b'richu. Le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata, tushbechata v'nechamata, da'amiran be'alma v'imru, Amen. Yehi shlam araba min shmaya, v'chayim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru, Amen. Oseh shalom b'mramav, hu ya'aseh shalom, aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru, Amen. May the one who creates harmony on high bring peace to us, to all the people Israel, and to all of the world. And we say,
Amen.
Amen. Thank you so much for being with us, for all who joined us. It's really a great pleasure to be with you. Thank you again to Dr. Camille Parmesan. And we're really looking forward tomorrow to Alex and Eli for their bar mitzvah tomorrow morning at 10:30. The link is on our temple's website. And we hope that you'll join us. Torah study tomorrow morning, led by Cantor Kahana at 9 o'clock. That link is also on the website. And would like to also invite Sally, the chair of our Social Action Committee, was going to tell us a little bit about Mitzvah Day and about some of the actions that we're doing in terms of climate change. Sally Rosenfeld.
Well, thank you, Rabbi. And it was really a remarkable experience to hear your interview with Dr. Parmesan. I'm kind of overwhelmed. So Mitzvah Day is coming up on Sunday, May 16th. But we have a phrase that we use that's on our Mitzvah Day shirts, our most recent version, that says every day is Mitzvah Day. And I think if Dr. Parmesan's words didn't stir us to action, well, I'm sure actually that they certainly did. So one of the activities that is included in this year's Mitzvah Day is a sign up to commit yourself or your household or your family to one or more actions to mitigate your carbon footprint, to lessen your carbon footprint, or to decrease the degradation of our environment. And we're going to be we're going to be suggestive in the actions, but not prescriptive. So you can come up with an action that fits your commitment and your family lifestyle, your individual lifestyle, or we will have some suggestions of activities linked to the sign up on the Mitzvah Day activities. We can all do our part. I think we have heard an incredible message, and I'm grateful that we had this opportunity to start thinking about what we can do. As a community, I'm looking forward to all the ideas and actions that we can take. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom. Thank you, Sally. Thank you for all the work that you're doing and the Mitzvah Day Committee is doing, and it's going to be really a wonderful event. That day also happens to be the beginning of Shavuot, so we're going to have some experiences all around the city with a view of the mountain and a reminder of God's sacred presence and the responsibility of standing at the foot of the mountain and making a difference in our world.
I'm going to invite you all to join us in singing a little bit of an unusual version of Adon Olam, but I think you'll catch it as we go along. Adon Olam, page 321.
Adon Olam, Hashem Malach, B'terem kol yitzir nivra. Adon Olam, Hashem Malach, Le'et nasa v'chafzo kol, Azai melech shemo nikra. Adon Olam, Hashem Malach, Ve'acharei kichlot hakol, Levado yimloch nora, Ve'hu haya, Ve'hu haver, Ve'hu yiyeh b'tifara, Ve'hu Eli, V'chai gwali, v'tzolchev li, b'yitzara. V'hu Eli, v'chai gwali, v'hu nisi, u'manos li, menat kosi b'yom ekra. Adon Olam, Hashem Alach. And I think to myself, what a wonderful world.
Eloheinu v'Elohei Avotenu v'Imotenu, God of our ancestors, God of our descendants, Adon Olam, Master of this wonderful world, we thank you for the gift, the beauty, the expansiveness of the world around us. And we thank you for the responsibility that you've given to us to be your partner in taking care of this world. We have made mistakes. We have been thoughtless and careless, but we can be thoughtful and we can be careful and we can do the work that needs to be done to make this world whole once again. Adonai Oz Lamo Yitein, Adonai Varechet Emo Shalom. Oh God, give strength to our people. God bless all of us with peace. Amen. Shabbat Shalom.
Amen. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat
Mazal
Shalom.
Tov to the
Mazel
Benebush
tov,
family,
Benebushes.
Block family.
Sababa
Thank you
to
to-
Professor Parmesan.
Yes, thank you. Can't wait to come and visit her again.